Is there really such a thing as brainwashing? Or mind control? What kind of person is susceptible? What exactly is a cult? And how are followers controlled? How can one recognize an organization that engages in such practices? And should such organizations be held responsible for the damage intentional manipulation can cause? The most insidious threat to our basic freedoms, such as freedom of mind and freedom of speech, is a little-known phenomenon known as mind control. Mind control refers to all coercive psychological systems, such as brainwashing, thought reform, and coercive persuasion. Mind control is the shaping of a person's attitudes, beliefs, and personality without the person's knowledge or consent. Mind control employs deceptive and surreptitious manipulation, usually in a group setting, for the financial or political profit of the manipulator. Mind control works by gradually exerting increasing control over individuals through a variety of techniques, such as excessive repetition of routine activities, intense humiliation, or sleep deprivation. Cult refers to a destructive group which uses mind control to deceivingly influence its members. It has become fairly standard to use this term for any organization or group which uses mind control on its members. Cults are not necessarily religious. A cult may form around any theme, such as a political, racial, psychotherapeutic, or even athletic agenda, for the protection of our basic human and constitutional rights. I hope to provide a fundamental education on the subject of mind control so that you can protect yourself and your loved ones from any individual or organization that is engaging in this kind of manipulation. Satan implemented his mind control scheme on the human race a long time ago, dumbing us down using various mediums, and it is time to recognize them. How does mind control work? A technical overview of mind control tactics. This document, in substance, was presented to the U.S. Supreme Court as an educational appendix on coercive psychological systems in the case Wallersheim v. Church of Scientology 89-1367 and 89-1361. The Wallersheim case was being considered related to issues involving abuse in this area. In this document, coercive persuasion is the professional term being used to describe the nature of coercive psychological systems. Wallersheim case specific details have been deleted. Coercion is defined as to restrain or constrain by force. Legally, it often implies the use of physical force or physical or legal threat. This traditional concept of coercion is far better understood than the technological concepts of coercive persuasion, which are effective restraining, impairing, or compelling through the gradual application of psychological forces. A coercive persuasion program is a behavioral change technology applied to cause the learning and adoption of a set of behaviors or an ideology under certain conditions. It is distinguished from other forms of benign social learning or peaceful persuasion by the conditions under which it is conducted and by the techniques of environmental and interpersonal manipulation employed to suppress particular behaviors and to train others. Over time, coercive persuasion, a psychological force akin in some ways to our legal concepts of undue influence, can be even more effective than pain, torture, drugs, and use of physical force in legal threats. The Korean War Manchurian Candidate, misconception of the need for suggestibility increasing drugs, and physical pain and torture, to effect thought reform, is generally associated with the old concepts and models of brainwashing. Today, they are not necessary for a coercive persuasion program to be effective. With drugs, physical pain, torture, or even a physically coercive threat, you can often temporarily make someone do something against their will. You can even make them do something they hate or they really did not like or want to do at the time. They do it, but their attitude is not changed. This is much different and far less devastating than that which you are able to achieve with the improvements of coercive persuasion. With coercive persuasion you can change people's attitudes without their knowledge and volition. You can create new attitudes, where they will do things willingly which they formerly may have detested, things which previously only torture, physical pain, or drugs could have coerced them to do. The advances in the extreme anxiety and emotional stress production technologies found in coercive persuasion supersede old-style coercion that focuses on pain, torture, drugs, or threaten that these older systems do not change attitudes so that subjects follow orders willingly. Coercive persuasion changes both attitude and behavior, not just behavior. The purposes and tactics of coercive persuasion. Coercive persuasion, or thought reform as it is sometimes known, is best understood as a coordinated system of graduated coercive influence and behavior control designed to deceptively and surreptitiously manipulate and influence individuals, usually in a group setting, in order for the originators of the program to profit in some way, normally financially or politically. The essential strategy used by those operating such programs is to systematically select, sequence and coordinate numerous coercive persuasion tactics over continuous periods of time. There are 7 main tactic types found in various combinations in a coercive persuasion program. A coercive persuasion program can still be quite effective without the presence of all 7 of these tactic types. Tactic 1. The individual is prepared for thought reform through increased suggestibility and /or softening up, specifically through hypnotic or other suggestibility increasing techniques such as A. Extended audio, visual, verbal, or tactile fixation drills. B. Excessive repetition of routine activities. C. Decreased sleep. D. Nutritional restriction. Tactic 2. Using rewards and punishments. Efforts are made to establish considerable control over a person's social environment, time, and sources of social support. Social isolation is promoted. Contact with family and friends is abridged, as is contact with persons who do not share group-approved attitudes. Economic and other dependence on the group is fostered. In the forerunner to coercive persuasion, brainwashing, this was rather easy to achieve through simple imprisonment. Tactic 3. Disconfirming information and non-supporting opinions are prohibited in group communication. Rules exist about permissible topics to discuss with outsiders. Communication is highly controlled, and in group, language is usually constructed. Tactic 4. Frequent and intense attempts are made to cause a person to re-evaluate the most central aspects of his or her experience of self and prior conduct in negative ways. Efforts are designed to destabilize and undermine the subject's basic consciousness, reality awareness, worldview, emotional control, and defense mechanisms, as well as getting them to reinterpret their life's history, and adopt a new version of causality. Tactic 5. Intense and frequent attempts are made to undermine a person's confidence in himself and his judgment, creating a sense of powerlessness. Tactic 6. Non-physical punishments are used, such as intense humiliation, loss of privilege, social isolation, social status changes, intense guilt, anxiety, manipulation, and other techniques for creating strong aversive emotional arousals, etc. Tactic 7. Certain secular psychological threats force are used or are present, that failure to adopt the approved attitude, belief, or consequent behavior will lead to severe punishment or dire consequence, e.g. physical or mental illness, the reappearance of a prior physical illness, drug dependence, economic collapse, social failure, divorce, disintegration, failure to find a mate, etc. Another set of criteria has to do with defining other common elements of mind control systems. If most of Robert J. Litton's 8-point model of thought reform is being used in a cultic organization, it is most likely a dangerous and destructive cult. These 8 points follow Robert J. Litton's 8-point model of thought reform. 1. Environment control, limitation of many/all forms of communication with those outside the group. Books, magazines, letters and visits with friends and family are taboo. Come out and be separate. 2. Mystical manipulation. The potential convert to the group becomes convinced of the higher purpose and special calling of the group through a profound encounter/experience. For example, through an alleged miracle or prophetic word of those in the group. 3. Demand for purity. An explicit goal of the group is to bring about some kind of change, whether it be on a global, social, or personal level. Perfection is possible if one stays with the group and is committed. 4. Cult of confession. The unhealthy practice of self-disclosure to members in the group, often in the context of a public gathering in the group, admitting past sins and imperfections, even doubts about the group and critical thoughts about the integrity of the leaders. 5. Sacred science. The group's perspective is absolutely true and completely adequate to explain everything. The doctrine is not subject to amendments or question. Absolute conformity to the doctrine is required. 6. Loaded language and new vocabulary emerges within the context of the group. Group members think within the very abstract and narrow parameters of the group's doctrine. The terminology sufficiently stops members from thinking critically by reinforcing a black and white mentality. Loaded terms and cliches prejudice thinking. 7. Doctrine over person. Pre-group experience and group experience are narrowly and decisively interpreted through the absolute doctrine, even when experience contradicts the doctrine. 8. Dispensing of existence. Salvation is possible only in the group. Those who leave the group are doomed. Coercive persuasion is not peaceful persuasion. Programs identified with the above listed 7 tactics have in common the elements of attempting to greatly modify a person's self-concept, perceptions of reality, and interpersonal relations. When successful in inducing these changes, coercive thought reform programs also, among other things, create the potential forces necessary for exercising undue influence over a person's independent decision-making ability, and even for turning the individual into a deployable agent for the organization's benefit without the individual's meaningful knowledge or consent. Coercive persuasion programs are effective because individuals experiencing the deliberately planned severe stresses they generate can only reduce the pressures by accepting the system or adopting the behaviors being promulgated by the purveyors of the coercion program. The relationship between the person and the coercive persuasion tactics are dynamic in that while the force of the pressures, rewards, and punishments brought to bear on the person are considerable, they do not lead to a stable, meaningful self-chosen reorganization of beliefs or attitudes. Rather, they led to a sort of coerced compliance and a situationally required elaborate rationalization for the new conduct. Once again, in order to maintain the new attitudes or decisions, sustain the rationalization, and continue to unduly influence a person's behavior over time, coercive tactics must be more or less continuously applied. A fiery, hell and damnation, guilt-ridden sermon from the pulpit or several hours with a high-pressure salesman or other single instances of the so-called peaceful persuasions do not constitute the necessary cause and orchestration of a sequenced, continuous, coordinated, and carefully selected program of surreptitious coercion, as found in a comprehensive program of coercive persuasion. Truly peaceful religious persuasion practices would never attempt to force, compel and dominate the free wills or minds of its members through coercive behavioral techniques or covert hypnotism. They would have no difficulty coexisting peacefully with U.S. laws meant to protect the public from such practices. Looking like peaceful persuasion is precisely what makes coercive persuasion less likely to attract attention or to mobilize opposition. It is also part of what makes it such a devastating control technology. Victims of coercive persuasion have no signs of physical abuse, convincing rationalizations for the radical or abrupt changes in their behavior, a convincing sincerity, and they have been changed so gradually that they don't oppose it because they usually aren't even aware of it. Deciding if coercive persuasion was used requires case-by-case careful analysis of all the influence techniques used and how they were applied, by focusing on the medium of delivery and process used, not the message, and on the critical differences, not the coincidental similarities. Which system was used becomes clear. The influence continuum helps make the difference between peaceful persuasion and coercive persuasion easier to distinguish. Variables. Not all tactics used in a coercive persuasion type environment will always be coercive. Some tactics of an innocuous or cloaking nature will be mixed in. Not all individuals exposed to coercive persuasion or thought reform programs are effectively coerced into becoming participants. How individual suggestibility, psychological and physiological strengths, weakness, and differences react with the degree of severity, continuity, and comprehensiveness in which the various tactics and content of a coercive persuasion program are applied, determine the program's effectiveness and or the degree of severity of damage caused to its victims. For example, in United States v. Lee 455 U.S. 252, 257, 2258, 1982, the California Supreme Court found that when a person is subjected to coercive persuasion without his knowledge or consent, he may develop serious and sometimes irreversible physical and psychiatric disorders. up to and including schizophrenia, self-mutilation, and suicide. What are the criteria of a coercive persuasion program? A. Determine if the subject individual held enough knowledge and volitional capacity to make the decision to change his or her ideas or beliefs. B. Determine whether that individual did, in fact, adopt, affirm, or reject those ideas or beliefs on his own. C. Then, if necessary, all that should be examined is the behavioral processes used, not ideological content. One needs to examine only the behavioral processes used in their conversion. Each alleged coercive persuasion situation should be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. The characteristics of coercive persuasion programs are severe, well understood, and they are not accidental. Coercive persuasion is not voluntary, peaceful, religious practice or central to any bona fide religion. Coercive persuasion is not a religious practice. It is a control technology. It is not a belief or ideology. It is a technological process. As a process, it can be examined by experts on its technology completely separate from any idea or belief content. Similar to examining the technical process of hypnotic induction distinct from the meaning or value of the post-hypnotic suggestions. Examining processes in this manner cannot violate First Amendment religious protections. Coercive persuasion is antithetical to the First Amendment. It is the unfair manipulation of others' biological and psychological weaknesses and susceptibilities. It is a psychological force technology, not of a free society, but of a criminal or totalitarian society. Any organization using coercive persuasion on its members as a central practice that also claims to be a religion is turning the sanctuary of the First Amendment into a fortress for psychological assault. It is a contradiction of terms and should be disestablished. Coercive persuasion is a subtle, compelling psychological force which attacks an even more fundamental and important freedom than our freedom of religion. Its reprehensibility and danger is that it attacks our self-determinism and free will, our most fundamental constitutional freedoms. The Illuminati dollar. Using a monopoly on the money supply, our enemy, the Illuminati, set about gobbling up other areas of society, all of which was done while the public slept unawares of the conspiracy. All people just know the information contained within this debriefing and on this site. The Illuminati managed to get this far off of the ignorance of the people. We must be ignorant no more. There are other things we can do as well. We need to keep pressing the politicians for change and keep them on their toes. Our ultimate goal is to educate the people and turn the outer ring against the inner core with truth until it cracks. We can capture the technology and make a good use of it. In the right hands, this technology can let the blind see and the deaf hear. Once it is readily available, then protective technologies will also emerge. Finally, we need to realize that what the enemy is doing is fear tactics. We should never give in to blackmail and fear tactics, even when our own loved ones are used for blackmail, because when we give in, then someone else, somewhere, is going to be tortured because of our weakness. If you know for a fact someone who is engaged in this mind control business, then turn them in before they kill someone else. Serial killers do not need to be protected, and national security is a joke considering there's a one world state which usurps national governments anyway. Imagine this. A very secret society, corrupted and hell-bent on worldwide domination, sets up ground-based and orbital satellite transmitters, perhaps using masers. The purpose of these are to brainwash, from birth, the citizens of the world with post-hypnotic suggestions to make them operate the way the secret society wants them to with just a few keyword commands. Which words and commands? How about sleep, forget, obey only my voice, and I am your master? Just to start with, it is said that a person will only go so far with hypnosis and that you can't do anything against your will. This is true. But how much willpower do you have when you're an infant and don't know anything? And how much willpower would you have if, in ignorance, you heard voices in your head and believed them to be your God? Programming someone in such a way is similar to how computerized Trojan horse programs work in computer viruses. They've created a backdoor into your mind from birth that only they have access to. I have met some people who ignorantly insist that the mind of man cannot be controlled. Oh, but it can under certain circumstances. A man's mind is normally controlled by correctly functioning minds under their own belief system. but weaken the correct functions of the mind, use their own belief system unknowingly against them, and also maintain around them a circled wall of ignorance, and they will do just about anything for you if they feel that it is justified. They will obey commands willingly. In the past we've had cult leaders such as Hitler, Manson, and Jim Jones use simple mind control techniques on their puppets with great success, proving that men can be manipulated and controlled to do things they normally wouldn't do. You can imagine the hell that this new unregulated technology can produce in the hands of vampiric political leaders. That hell is now because what you may or may not know is that these games are already in progress and hundreds of people are getting burned by them. Haven't you ever wondered why you have to work so hard to get ahead while the elites seem to have it made? Give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much, but have harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages, only to put them in a purse with holes in it. Haggai 1:5-6. When they inflate the money supply, your purse gets more holes. When they deflate the economy and cause a recession or depression, you stand a good chance of losing your purse, through corporate downsizing, and loss of jobs. So what do they do with all this free money? Why, they kill people by creating wars in other countries, brainwash the mass populace, and corrupt the laws of the land. There is an unspoken rule that the best money to be made is to loan money to countries at war, because any country at war will bankrupt itself to survive. And after the war you have a few devastated nations that are under your thumb. Anytime usury, debt-based monetary systems, fractional reserve banking, and fiat money coexist together, they led to mass murder, war, corruption, and the breakdown of society. Reflection, clarification, discussion, information giving, directed questioning, creative expression, advisory/therapeutic, commenting on problem or alternatives, suggesting ideas, recommending solutions, rational argument, message-oriented, hypnosis, some forms, compliance-oriented, emotional appeals, compliance tactics, consistency, reciprocation, social proof, authority, liking, scarcity. Cialdi 1985, hypnosis, some forms, selective reward punishment, denigration of self and of critical thinking, dissociative states to suppress doubt and critical thinking, alternation of harshness/threats and leniency/love, control-oriented guilt induction, active promotion of dependency, debilitation, physical restraint/punishment, pressured public confessions. He who controls the money supply controls that nation. If you're in the center of things and control when the market expands or contracts, then you know ahead of time what to do financially. The money is there for the taking. Take control of the money system. Buy out the politicians on both sides of the political fence. By controlling interest in the stock of the media companies. Change the laws of the land to escape justice. Control the schools and keep the populace dumb. The definition of communism is a system in which political and economic power is concentrated in one party or ruling class. In America, that ruling class is the Federal Reserve and those that control it. Democracy in America is an illusion, one that is perpetuated with gas genocide. Now that we have a world central banking system and an IMF, there is no such animal as democracy. In reality, it is a world communist state, a new world order. You are literally paying people with your taxes to steal from you and use the stolen money to sponsor wars which then kill your children. Mind control and religion. Coercive persuasion is secular conduct, insofar as it is recognized as coercion and undue influence. It is illegal conduct. Prohibition of this specific conduct will protect the state itself and the free exercise rights of all citizens without infringing on the free exercise rights of religious organizations. Coercive persuasion is antithetical to the First Amendment. It achieves much of the harmful result of fraud, false imprisonment, coercion, undue influence, involuntary servitude, intentional infliction of emotional distress, outrageous conduct, and other tortious acts. Coercive persuasion is unfair manipulation of the biological and psychological weaknesses and susceptibilities of one's fellow man. It is an opposite to charity and kindness. It is a psychological modus operandi of a criminal or totalitarian society. Coercive persuasion is not a religious practice. It is a covert control technology. It is not a belief or an ideology. It is a technological process that impairs rationality. As a process, it can be examined separately from any message content that may be associated with its practitioners. This is like examining the technical processes used in hypnotic induction separately from examining the meaning or value of any hypnotic suggestion given during hypnosis. Examining processes, never beliefs, will not violate anyone's First Amendment religious protections. John Dewey believed that the human power to respond to reason and truth protects democracy. Any organization using coercive persuasion on its members that also claims to be a religion is turning the sacred trust and privileges of our democratic First Amendment sanctuary into a fortress for psychological assault. It is covertly twisting religious freedom to deny our more basic constitutional right to unfettered rationality and our freedom of thought and free will. Freedom of religion cannot exist without first having an absolutely protected freedom of thought. Freedom of religion without freedom of thought is an absurdity. A church cannot seek the protection of one constitutional amendment while it allegedly deprives citizens of the protection of other constitutional guarantees. Robin George v. International Society of Krishna Consciousness 473 F. Suppa 312. US 89 to 1399. As you will learn from other pages on this site, the Illuminati own and operate several big companies which make an enormous amount of money, and this money is used to finance their evil empire.